welcome to BloombergQuint. The telecom sector is buzzing again. On Wednesday, we saw the government or the cabinet approving sale of over 2,200 megahertz of spectrum, especially in some of the bands like 700, 900, 2300, uh, and at the same time deferring sale of spectrum in the 3300 to 3600 megahertz, which basically means that 5G rollout may get pushed by a year or two. Uh, in addition to that, we have also seen companies like Vodafone increasing select tariffs for postpaid customers. That also brings in a new dynamic in the sector. To discuss this, we have Rajiv Sharma joining me today. Rajiv, good morning and thank you for joining us in Bloomberg. My first question to you is on the cabinet decisions of yesterday. Uh, do you see there will be enough demand for the spectrum when the auction happens around March, April next year?
Yeah, hi, Sajeet. Thanks for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be on BloombergQuint. Will there be enough demand? I think there are two types of things which we will see playing out. One is that some amount of renewal is coming up for Bharti and Vodafone and even Reliance Jio in the 900, 1800 and 800 bands respectively. 900, I think, is just one or two circles, particularly being Tamil Nadu for both the incumbents. And Jio has its 800 across 10, 12 markets coming up for renewal. In 1800, the incumbents do have spectrum in the existing band over and above what is coming up for renewal. So we could see them doing some amount of rationing. That this spectrum is no more being used for voice; it is being used for 4G. So it is very imperative for them that they continue to hold that and they renew it. What we'll see, Bharti trying to add some 4G spectrum incrementally in couple of markets, maybe metro markets, where they could face congestion issue. Now that we have, seeing loads of traffic because of work from home, and we could see Vodafone, given the balance sheet constraints, restricting to, the renewal spectrum, and Jio, which is gaining market share in 4G, may attempt to add more 4G spectrum to accommodate growth over and above the renewal in 800 spectrum bands.
It's interesting, because Jio had been sharing the ARCOM spectrum, and that is the spectrum which is coming in for refarming. You expect that Jio to go and acquire that spectrum. It's more than 115 megahertz of spectrum that's coming for refarming of ARCOM. Are you going to see some kind of pricing competition coming in, even though there are three players in the market?
I don't think. I think everything happens broadly at the reserve prices. See, networks in architecture, network design is very difficult for any telco to change just because a new spectrum has come in 10 markets, because everybody is pan India and they have a network architecture which speaks to the rest of every state speaks to the rest of the states. So experimenting with 800 for incumbents in couple of markets will be interesting thing. Cannot be ever ruled out. We can never rule out anything in telecoms, but given that you have 5G, you've got 700, you've got more spectrum coming of future, I don't think that experimentation is any likely the case. And for Jio, their network design is based on this 800 which they share with ARCOM. So it's very important for them that they do not really suddenly change the network architecture, else we could see some network issues, because this is a sub gigahertz spectrum. It gives you coverage benefits. It helps you with the voice element on VoLTE. So experimentation here and there could be playing with the QS. So I think everybody sticks to, except for incumbents, rationing bit on 1800. I don't see anybody really experimenting much as far as the renewal is concerned.
But I don't think 1800 is coming up for renewal in this round, because what we heard was 700, 800, 900, 2100, 2300 and 2500 is the one which is coming up for auction. So I was really surprised when I didn't see 1800. Do you see 1800 also being added to it?
Well, I may have to double check on that, but there are renewals in few of the circles in 1800.
That is right.
Yeah. So if that is not coming in this auction, and if they've missed that out, it should happen soon, because there is a renewal. So you'll have to do it closer to the renewal at some
Hmm.
point of time. And 900 is coming up for renewal in a couple of
Yeah,
markets,
yeah.
and 800 is renewal is there. Now rest 23, 20, 100, 2500 will depend. Who's really facing capacity issues market by market, and they would be willing to add that spectrum accordingly.
Hmm. It's more than 2,200 megahertz of spectrum which is coming up for auction. Do you expect the entire spectrum to be taken up, or is we still see some, uh, you know, uh, the players being little more cautious and they take only what they require, because the government hasn't come out with the 5G auctions yet, and at the same time they are looking at to ensure that the 4G spectrum is taken up before they go for 5G.
Well, I don't think we'll be even close to what in terms of the total amount of spectrum being auctioned and what get absorbed, because and there's a reason behind government going with this auction first, then the C-band spectrum for 5G, is that if you were to straight away auction the 5G spectrum right now, then the
Mm,
demand for 4G spectrum may come down, and government
mm,
forever may sit with this spectrum, because once you move the telcos to 5G, then there'll be lesser demand for 4G in the coming days, or the 4G spectrum in the coming days. So
mm,
it is very, very strategic that you first put all the 4G spectrum on the block, and then maybe a year later we could see the C-band spectrum auction coming in. And as I said, the spectrum bands in 2300, 2500, they're not very expensive on a pop per megahertz per pop. So you could see some take up in these bands, because what happens for a telco is when he adds spectrum, then he has to invest lesser in cell towers. But these are millimeter waves. They give you
mm,
hardly any coverage. They give you
mm.
more capacity. So
Yeah.
in a work from home scenario where you are facing capacity issues and you cannot put more equipments, this spectrum comes very, very handy. So it
Mhm.
will address those challenges for telcos.
So it's going to be basically based on the last 8 to 10 months of experience of telcos. We see which are the circles where you are having capacity issue, and not the coverage. Because coverage-wise, they may be there, but it's the capacity constraint which they're trying to address through this option. That's what you say.
Absolutely. So it is more of a capacity challenge which the operators may be facing. They could address this for coverage. They will have to continue investing in cell sites.
Hmm. What is the kind of expenses or cost which the three telcos may be incurring? Because have you done some rough calculation what they will have to do?
See, if you were to look at total renewal bill, then it is some 10,000 odd crores for both the incumbents and a little higher number for Geo. But if the 1800 is not part of this spectrum auction, then it's a very small number for both the incumbents. But the bill for Geo is in on those lines only, because 800 renewal will be expensive one for Geo to carry out.
Hmm. This basically means that government's ambitious plan of raising nearly 4 lakh crores or something is not going to come through this auction, right?
Well, even the last auction, we've seen that government has similar plans. Um, Now, these next 3-4 months are critical. If you really, if government really understands the fact that 5G is the new technology which is getting in place, and
Hmm.
moment 5G comes in, telcos will be chasing or will be going for 100 megahertz blocks. In
Hmm.
that case, what will be the residual value after 3 years for a spectrum band in 2300 or 2500?
Hmm. Hmm.
So in that case, what do you do now? Should you go ahead and lower the spectrum prices in 2300 and
Hmm.
2500 significantly, so that a large part of it is taken up? Otherwise, this is going to sit idle in the books of government.
Hmm.
Yeah, but there's an interesting catch. If the telcos are able to add this 2300, 2500 at very cheap prices, they may be just somewhat delay in terms of taking up 5G spectrum or rollout because their near-term demands could be met. And we all know new technology takes a while before it stabilizes
mm,
and before it goes to mass market. But if you take a 10-year view in terms of value of those spectrum bands, I believe it's important if government could look at revisiting the lower prices in some of these bands because it will
mm.
help that a big chunk is taken up now, and then government is not sitting with the spectrum in the coming years.
What about the strategy of telcos, which where they can use the 23 or 2500 band to leap into 5G technology? Because currently 33 gigahertz and 33 to 36 is not available for 5G, but there is a possibility technologically that they can leap into 5G using 23 or 25.
Well, the basic, that's a good question and that's a good thought. But the basic premise for 5G is that you need 100 megs of spectrum.
Mm, mm,
Now, 23, 2500 may give you 20 meg. Maybe, some of the circles you'll have to see availability if there is some more. But it
mm,
is not going to give you a continuous or contiguous
100.
100 meg.
Yeah,
And
the
that's the
pipeline
basic.
has to be bigger.
Yeah. So, until the time you really have 100 meg, um, you will really have, uh, you know, you will be better with 4G, but it's still not a 5G. You could call it 4.5G or
Mm,
4.5G. So I believe that that experimentation may not make sense. It's better to the C-band spectrum auction is just 12 months away. Why experiment? Because the first rollout will also have an impact on your brand when it comes to 5G. So
mm,
just having a notional 5G in place, which is not really 5G, may not make any sense. And we could see that it's only when the C band comes in, the serious
mm.
5G rollout happens, uh, because it gives you a big chunk around 18, around 100 meg of spectrum.
So if that's the case, then you're basically seeing the 5G spectrum coming up for coming for auction not before the 2022 March April, right? And if you have a large chunk of the spectrum unauctioned from this current set, then you see enough demand coming for 5G as well at that point in time.
So yes, so if these auctions are happening March next year, 21,
Yeah, yeah.
5G could happen, somewhere around November, December. I'm saying the best possible case,
Mm,
or
mm,
maybe in 22.
mm,
And so a rollout is unlikely before 22 end or 23, depending on the auction timing. Now, so that's how the 5G rollout seems to be. What was the other part of the question? I seem to have
you
missed.
know, so so do you see that rollout getting pushed by a few years?
Well, nobody's, I don't think anybody is expecting the rollout to be in 22. Yes, we've heard one operator talking about, accelerated 5G rollout, because you have to see that, 5G, like 4G was a catalyst to consolidation. It drove 13 to
Mm,
4. 5G could
mm,
be another catalyst to consolidation in the coming days.
mm,
So, in that sense, I would believe that it's just a 9 to 12 months delay, not much. And even in a recent development, 3GPP has delayed its release 17 for 5G. So we are seeing 5G stabilizing as a whole. And India
mm,
does well with any technology when at least some global subscribers are there and the global ecosystem, at least in terms of handset, evolves.
mm,
Today, there are very, very few handsets, and they are in the $500 plus
mm,
category, and we are a smartphone, low end smartphone market. So
mm,
I believe that delay is unlikely to really have any major impact on the bigger picture,
mm,
because even if the relay was to happen, even if the launch or rollout was to happen in 22, the best case, the ecosystem towards 5G may not have aligned to the India needs in terms of
mm,
low unit cost of equipment. And you are experimenting with Open
mm,
RAN. Rakuten has just launched in Japan. It's early days for them as well. We'll have to see how this really plays out.
mm,
Uh, you know, so it will allow us time to have lot of learning curves from various markets, and the cost will gradually decline over a period of time.
No, because we already have close to 170, 190 million subscribers. China leading the way for that. In Korea, which was the first to go with 5G, we have already 10 million subscribers, and they have a nearly 90% coverage of the country there as of now. So, do you see that's not enough to start a 5G, or Indian players will more wait for the balance sheet to get strengthened before venturing into 5G?
So,
Except for Geo, which has enough capital on its
yeah. So now, see, there is no use case, incremental use case with 5G, unless generally what happens is it's more of a capacity offload.
yeah.
And if you have a lot of 4G spectrum sitting with the government, I think telcos taking that is a right step in the direction of addressing capacity issues.
Mm.
See, India is not a market just because you've got a 5G. So 4G came at sharp lower prices versus 3G.
Yeah.
Now, today we are a very consolidated market with three, and the top two are likely to garner 80%, 85%. In that case, we still have pricing power with telcos.
Mm.
But it remains to be seen that so much of capex which has to come with 5G
Mm.
will telcos will be really able to monetize it, or it
Mm.
is just a just something which is going to add to the balance sheet.
Mm.
Thing. And even Bharti at 3 times net debt EBITDA is not really very well placed to go all out with 5G, at least over the next 12, 15 months.
Okay.
So I believe it's a combination of issues which will see 5G getting a little bit delayed, if you may say so.
Mm. My next thing which I needed to discuss with you is the kind of price hikes which Vodafone has undertaken, especially in the key circles, in the post-paid market. We haven't seen other operators, following up with such similar price hikes. What is preventing them from, taking this price hike?
Well, it is very rare for the smallest player in terms of market share and the one which is losing market share to go and take tariff hikes because the declining market share is telling you something about the telco. Could be the network thing, or could be something else. And if
Mm.
you go and you're already 10-15% premium to the largest 4G player, which
Yeah.
is here. So if and you never know that whether Geo will follow suit or not. So in that case, your gap will widen on the pricing gap will widen for Vodafone customers. So
Mm.
they are bound to think twice that okay, we continue with Vodafone, or we may see Vodafone having an accelerated decline in market share. So it's going to be very, very tricky for we to really go ahead with tariff hikes. I think it's Bharti and Geo which will decide the tariff hike. I believe
Mm.
these auctions will add to the input cost in terms of total cost of the telco in terms of providing services and the 5G, keeping 5G in mind. We are not very far from tariff hike. We could be 1 or 2 quarters away. But even we have to wait for a time when Geo's subscriber growth is not really driving the growth it has delivered historically on revenue
Mm. Mm.
on the on the Geo side. So once that is coming down a little bit in the category of 4-5%, we could see
Mm.
Geo also getting in favor of tariff hikes.
Mm. You know, it also shows that their postpaid customers are much more loyal than expected, right? If the price hike hasn't seen Vodafone's postpaid customer base coming down much, even though they have the highest postpaid customer base among the three telcos. So we see Vodafone, pushing that across other circles as well, where it has good loyal postpaid customers.
So the current tariff hike in the postpaid has happened in a the family plans where there are 2-3 users and where there is data sharing. So it's those are very sticky plans.
Hmm.
Now we despite we've seen Vodafone losing some market share, the postpaid which is still remains with Vodafone they're definitely sticky with the brand, and with some tariff hikes they are not going to move. But postpaid is still a very small part of the base. It's not going to
Mm,
move the needle. What will move the needle is prepaid. So we could see some experiment with the minimum recharge plans.
mm,
That could be one, because you're not competing directly with Geo there, and
yeah.
competing with Bharti, and Bharti may say, okay, this is a segment we could do some tweaking, but the real big jump in revenues will come from the ARPU, the subscribers which are neither in MRP, neither in postpaid, but in between,
Mm,
and that's where you compete with Geo. And till the time all three telcos are willing to raise tariffs,
mm.
any tariff hike initiated by we may not be sustainable in this segment, which would be giving 60-70% to your revenues.
So you're saying that a prepaid tariff hike may not come through unless a directive from the or the regulation from the TRA comes on.
No, no, no. I never meant it. I think all three telcos have to be willing, and so
See, all are willing it because that's what they have told the TRA that they want a minimum price. Which they need some
see,
price there in various services, which includes the data prices, which may be 4 times higher than the current price which we are paying for data today.
right. So Try has yet to decide on that,
Yeah.
and in that case, we'll have to wait till how Try takes a call on the
Mm,
minimum support, because it is, in my view, a very very sensitive decision. Because if you take a similar decision in telecoms, then there will be other sectors which may ask for it. Now,
mm,
government has, for example, fixated the price band for airlines during the COVID times in terms of
mm,
airfares. But
mm.
what scenario when the airlines are bleeding? I don't think it is something very easy or straightforward for Try to come out with. But if telcos are so supportive of this fact, then what stops them to go and tweak their current plans? They really do not need a Try directive, because we are in forbearance, and they all three could raise tariffs. So there is some disconnect, and that's why it is taking time for a second round of tariff hike. What we saw in December last year, after that, we'll have to wait a little bit.
But TRA has taken such decisions when it comes to broadcasting industry. You have a price cap there in broadcasting industry if you want to sell it to the customer. So it's not new for TRA to put price bands or caps with respect to either minimum side or the maximum side uh, for the customer.
Well, it is not new, and broadcasting industry's always been like that. But it
Yeah,
is new when it comes to telecoms, because you had a policy of forbearance, and
yeah,
that's where it raises the flags. That okay, this was an industry. For example, even the metered caps, you have a starting price. States
mm,
decides, and everything is there.
yeah,
So, but if in telecoms you start with then it could really change the landscape as well.
mm,
In the sense that so we've seen a big consolidation and exits, but then there could be fresh money or fresh licenses in demand. One says, oh, our business case is protected because we know how much tariffs you're going to get, and could we take a bet on the India market again?
you know,
Will the three telcos be in favor of such a scenario as well, remains to be seen.
because if prepaid is the one which everyone is targeting, both Vodafone and Airtel have a lower, recharge, minimum recharge as compared to Geo. What's preventing them from increasing that minimum recharge? Because you have Geo, which is the price, which is very price competitive at a higher recharge. So why is Airtel and Vodafone not able to raise the minimum recharge part of it?
It's not that they've not done it. They've made
They
two.
did it last year.
Yeah, they made two changes. Now again, you have to again understand the branding of that category. It is minimum recharge. So we are again catering to the segment of the economy which is finding it difficult to have a minimum recharge. There you have to be price sensitive, because if you're not, then their news, you may see some churn happening in that segment. So it's only so much you could do in this category. You cannot price that category from a $40, or $45 to straight away $80. It will have its own implication. You could change it to 50 or 52, and I think those changes have happened. A small tweak will happen, but it will not have a big impact on your financials.
When do you see the ecosystem also changing for that particular category? Because today you have 2G, 3G, 4G. In 2 years, 2.5 years time, you will have 5G, which is coming in. There is no the base of the entire pyramid, which is 2G customer, voice customer. Do you see them also migrating to 3G in that sense, or can operators push them to 3G through some way of other?
Well, 3G is being phased out. So what the debate in the sector is about having low cost smartphones on the 4G side, and we've seen one discussion being in the sector about a 2G Mukt Bharat, so which is basically upgrading these set of subscribers to a low cost 4G smartphone, and to my understanding and to our understanding, Google and Jio are working together to deliver something on those lines. So, but it's going to be very tricky because if you look at the BOM of a bill of materials for a smartphone, it's only so much you could do. But yes, then nudge is there. Even Bharti's seems to be experimenting on that side. So we will have some element of price cuts on those low-end smartphones, which could see some shift from 2G to 4G. But 2G is here to stay for still some more time, in my view. Because we're talking about an India which is so rural, and where it's only 2G, and it's very difficult that you could really come out of 2G completely anytime soon, even if you were to
Finally,
crack the.
finally, Rajiv, if TRA delays this, floor pricing, do you expect Vodafone to go ahead and raise its prepaid prices?
Well,
Because
I think attempts will be made. There will be attempts on this side, but there has to be if Vodafone was to take a tariff hike, and if it is not followed by Jio in 30 to 35 days of Vodafone initiating it, we could see a rollback. So maybe in a quarter or so, we could see all three telcos doing it, because they, when you launch a technology, let's say 5G, you cannot ask for a big premium versus 4G, because you want that technology to have more mass in the Indian context. So it's better to reprice everything before you launch 5G, so that your cash flows are enough not only to invest in 5G, but even push 5G at a later date. So I believe that we still some time away, but tariffs will increase. And in case of Bharti, if you look at the way they have been upgrading their users to 4G, natural nudge to 4G will, because your starting plan is around $200, we'll see Bharti's ARPU converging to 200 sooner than later.
Yeah, and Bharti has been the fastest in converting customers to 4G and adding 4G customers in the last couple of months.
Yep, versus Vodafone, Jio's all customers are 4G.
Yeah, 4G. Yeah. So do you see the tariff hike coming first, or the minimum recharge hike coming first in that scenario?
So minimum recharge plan may happen, but again, it's not going to move the needle. So it is tariff hike which has to really move the needle, and that could be 3-4 months away. Once we have to see that Jio is not really having its historical average growth, what it has seen from the new subscriber addition, then it may have to revisit that. Okay, because see, any new revenue stream which has to come from digital services is still very far. For it to be even 10% of total revenues. And if you have to keep investing, if you might have raised cash, but if you have to keep investing, and if you roll out 5G in the 4G prices, then even for Jio to make any positive IRR in the longer term will be very tricky. So I believe tariff hikes are quite likely in that scenario. We could be some time away, but they cannot be ruled out at all.
Rajiv, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure is here as well. Thank you so much.